I knew exactly what would happen Tuesday morning. I'd known since Friday afternoon when they handed me my walking papers. Two FDA investigators walked through our lobby doors at 8 a.m. sharp on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting on my back deck 30 yards away, adjusting my thermostat down 2 degrees, watching steam rise off my black coffee. I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't pacing. I already knew exactly what they'd find when they opened their clipboards. My name is Preston Wade. I'm 54 years old. For 26 years, I was the Quality Assurance Director at Nashville Medical Components, a cardiac monitoring device manufacturer just outside Music City. My job was keeping our $2.8 million CMS contract clean, compliant, and audit-ready every single day. I was the guy who knew where every batch record lived. I was the guy who understood every validation protocol, every deviation report, every CAPA timeline. I was the guy who made sure the temperature logs were current and the calibration certificates were filed before any device rolled off our production line. I was good at it. The numbers proved that. 0 FDA observations in my last 4 inspections. Not one. I packed my desk on a Friday afternoon. The FDA audit was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Nobody thought to ask me about the transition before they showed me the door. Let me back up here. Nashville Medical had been family-owned since 1994. The Morrison family ran a tight operation. Real manufacturing people who understood that medical devices aren't software you can patch after release. I started there at 28, straight from a pharmaceutical quality gig in Memphis that paid decent but had no upward movement. Nashville Medical had FDA registration and a real quality management system, and they needed someone to run it full-time. I said yes. I built the entire QMS operation from scratch over my first 5 years. The document control system, the batch record tracking, the corrective action database, the supplier qualification protocols. I wrote the quality manual myself, all 127 pages. I sat through 8 FDA inspections and never received more than 2 observations. Clean inspections every time. The Morrison family knew what they had. The Morrison family sold to a private equity group out of Chicago 16 months ago. That group installed Mason Clark as CEO. Mason was 38 years old. He'd spent his career in fintech, payment processing software, the kind of startup that has kombucha on tap and calls Friday afternoon drinking team building. He had never stepped foot inside an FDA-regulated manufacturing facility. He had never read 21 CFR Part 820. He didn't know what a DHR was. I know this because our first meeting he asked me to explain design history records from the beginning, not just the process, the concept, like he'd never heard the term before. I explained it. All of it. Device master records, design controls, design review procedures. He nodded like it made sense. He took notes on a tablet. He didn't ask a single follow-up question. That told me everything I needed to know about the next 16 months. For the first few months, Mason shadowed me and asked questions that sounded reasonable until you actually thought about them. Can we move the batch records to a cloud platform? Can we digitize the device history files? Do we really need physical signatures on every quality document? Can't we just use electronic signatures for everything? Every time I gave him the same answer. FDA inspectors don't audit your cloud storage. They show up with checklists and they want to see paper. They want to flip through binders and find every document with wet signatures. That's how medical device regulation works. That's how it's always worked since the medical device amendments of 1976. You don't get to disrupt federal compliance requirements because you find them inconvenient. Mason would nod and say, "Got it." He'd write something on his tablet. Then 3 weeks later, he'd circle back with the same question repackaged as a process improvement initiative or digital transformation opportunity. I started adjusting my thermostat up 1 degree every time he asked the same question twice. By month 6, my office was running 4 degrees warmer than normal. The real problem started when Mason brought in his efficiency consultants. 3 guys from Chicago, all under 35, all wearing the same style of glasses that cost more than my monthly car payment. They spent 2 weeks walking around with clipboards, timing how long it took our production staff to complete batch records by hand. They measured the square footage of our document storage room. They counted how many filing cabinets we had. Their final report was 47 pages of PowerPoint slides with titles like Digitization Opportunities and Legacy Process Optimization. The executive summary recommended eliminating 80% of our paper documentation and moving to a fully digital quality system within 6 months. I read the whole thing. Every slide. It was clear they had no understanding of FDA requirements for Class II medical devices. They kept referring to our batch records as paperwork inefficiencies. They suggested we could save $30,000 per year in storage costs by scanning everything and throwing away the originals. I scheduled a meeting with Mason the next day. I brought the CFR regulations. I brought examples from recent FDA warning letters to companies that had tried similar optimizations. I brought a copy of our current registration with FDA showing our established quality system. Mason listened for about 10 minutes. Then he said, "Preston, I appreciate your institutional knowledge, but we need to think bigger picture here. We can't let regulatory complexity prevent us from innovating." Regulatory complexity, that's what he called 26 years of federal compliance expertise. That was the moment I started adjusting my thermostat down instead of up. The temperature in my office dropped 2 degrees that afternoon. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was preparing for what was coming. Then Brady Mills showed up. Brady Mills arrived on a Monday morning in March, wearing chinos and a polo shirt with some startup logo I didn't recognize. Mason's second cousin, 26 years old, background in enterprise software sales. He walked into my office carrying a MacBook and a coffee cup that said "Disrupt Everything" on the side. Mason introduced him as a process consultant who was going to help modernize our quality function. Brady had a Lean Six Sigma green belt from an online program. 8 weeks of coursework. He was very proud of it. Kept mentioning it in conversations where it wasn't relevant. I showed Brady the QM's master files on his first day. 3 black binders, 4 inches thick each, organized by tab dividers updated quarterly for 26 years. 500-plus pages of procedures, work instructions, forms, and records. Every page cross-referenced, every revision tracked, every signature dated and witnessed. He looked at them the way you'd look at a rotary phone in 2026, like something that technically still worked but shouldn't exist anymore. "Why isn't this in a shared drive?" he asked, same as Mason had asked 8 months earlier. "Because FDA investigators don't bring laptops to read your shared drive," I said, same answer I'd given Mason. "They bring clipboards and pens." Brady opened his MacBook. Started typing notes. We could scan these into a document management system, make them searchable, add version control, really streamline the whole process. I adjusted my thermostat down another degree. These are controlled documents. FDA requires original signatures on hard copies for Class II medical devices. You can't just scan them and throw away the originals. But why not? Brady asked. He said it like it was a genuine question, not like he was challenging the regulation. Like he really didn't understand why anyone would require paper in 2026. I spent 20 minutes explaining 21 CFR Part 820.184, the FDA's requirements for device history records, how every medical device that leaves our facility has to have a complete paper trail showing it was manufactured according to approved specifications, how digital signatures are acceptable for some documents, but not for batch records, how temperature logs have to be maintained in their original format for a minimum of 2 years after the device's expiration date. Brady nodded and took notes, asked good follow-up questions, seemed to understand the complexity. I thought maybe this wouldn't be as bad as I'd expected. I was wrong. Over the next 4 months, I watched Brady try to fix systems that weren't broken. He started with small things, reorganized our filing system to be more intuitive, changed the naming convention for our controlled documents to include revision dates in the file name, created a spreadsheet to track which procedures needed updates. None of these changes were necessarily bad. Some were even improvements, but they were unnecessary. Our existing system worked. It had passed 8 FDA inspections without major findings. It was built specifically for regulatory compliance, not user convenience. The real problems started when Brady purchased the quality management software. $12,000 per year for a cloud-based platform that promised to revolutionize medical device quality assurance. The sales demo looked impressive. Digital batch records, automated CAPA tracking, electronic signatures, real-time reporting dashboards. I reviewed the technical specifications. The system couldn't generate FDA-compliant batch records. The electronic signature module didn't meet 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. The audit trail functionality was limited to 90 days of data retention. For Class 2 medical devices, we needed permanent records. I scheduled a meeting with Mason and Brady. I brought printed copies of the FDA regulations. I brought examples from recent warning letters to companies that had implemented similar systems incorrectly. I brought a cost analysis showing how much we'd spend fixing compliance issues after implementation. Mason listened for about 5 minutes. Then he said, "Preston, I appreciate your attention to detail, but sometimes you have to take calculated risks to move forward." Brady's done the research on this. The system has excellent reviews. Brady pulled up the vendor's website on his laptop, showed us testimonials from satisfied customers. Most of them were software companies or non-regulated manufacturers. None were FDA-regulated medical device facilities. "Look," Brady said, "this is the direction the industry is moving. We can't stay stuck in the 1990s forever just because that's how we've always done things." I said, "We do things this way because it's what FDA requires, not because we're stuck in the past." Mason made a note on his tablet. "Preston, I need you to be more flexible here. We're trying to position this company for growth. That means embracing new technologies, not resisting them." I adjusted my thermostat down 3 degrees when I got back to my office. Brady implemented the system 6 weeks later. I wasn't consulted on the rollout plan. I found out about it when I came in on a Monday morning and saw our production staff staring at computer screens instead of filling out batch records by hand. The first problem appeared within 2 days. The system automatically deleted audit trail data older than 90 days to optimize storage performance. Brady had configured it to run the cleanup process every weekend. 6 months of temperature logs, calibration records, and batch documentation disappeared in one automatic purge. I printed out the FDA regulation requiring 2-year retention minimums for Class 2 device records. I highlighted the relevant sections. I put it on Brady's desk with a note explaining that we just lost documentation for 847 devices that were still within their warranty period. Brady's response was an email. "Preston, appreciate the feedback. The system is designed for efficiency. We can generate reports for any specific devices if needed." This is how modern quality management works. Brady, I forwarded the email to Mason. Mason replied, "Preston, let's discuss this in person rather than over email." Brady is learning the system too. Give him some time to work out the bugs. Mason, there were no bugs to work out. The system was working exactly as designed. It just wasn't designed for FDA-regulated manufacturing. I started staying late to print out backup copies of critical records before the weekend purge cycles. I created shadow files for every batch record, every calibration certificate, every deviation report. I stored them in my office filing cabinet, just in case. Colton Reed, my production supervisor, started stopping by my office more frequently. He'd worked with me for 14 years. He knew the regulations as well as I did. He could see what was happening. Brady asked me why we still use paper traveler cards. Colton said one afternoon, he wants to put everything on tablets. I told him the tablets can't handle the production floor environment. He said we should upgrade to rugged tablets. I adjusted my thermostat down another degree. "Did you explain about the signature requirements?" I tried. He said electronic signatures are more secure than handwritten ones. I showed him the CFR section about witnessed signatures. He said regulations need to evolve with technology. That evening, I went home and looked up recent FDA enforcement actions. I found 3 warning letters from the past year specifically citing inadequate record retention and improper electronic signature implementation. All 3 companies had been using similar quality management software platforms. I printed them out. I put them in a folder on my desk where Brady would see them during his next office visit. He never mentioned them. The termination meeting came on a Friday afternoon in October. The termination meeting came on a Friday at 3:30 p.m. Mason's assistant sent a calendar invite at 3:17 p.m. Subject line, quick check-in. No agenda, no details beyond Mason's conference room. In 26 years, I had never been called to a quick check-in at 3:30 on a Friday afternoon. In corporate speak, quick check-ins mean the decision is already made and the meeting is just paperwork. I walked down the hall. Colton Reed was coming out of the break room with a Mountain Dew. He saw my face. He'd worked with me for 14 years. He knew what that calendar invite meant. Mason's conference room was the only one with windows facing the parking lot. He was sitting at the head of the table, arranging a stack of papers that looked suspiciously blank. Brady was leaning back in his chair, scrolling his phone. He was wearing a jacket with some startup logo I didn't recognize, probably a company that no longer existed. Preston, Mason said, "Have a seat." I sat down. I kept my hands flat on the table. I adjusted my internal thermostat down 2 degrees without moving. "We've been evaluating the quality function," Mason started. He had a specific expression he made when delivering bad news. Eyebrows slightly raised, mouth pulled into a straight line like he was taking this harder than I was. "The regulatory landscape is evolving. Everything is moving digital. We need someone who thinks in that framework naturally." I said, "We manufacture Class 2 medical devices that monitor cardiac rhythms. Someone still has to physically inspect them before they go into patients." "That's legacy thinking," Brady said without looking up from his phone. "Quality is data at the source level now. Real-time analytics, predictive compliance." I looked at him. He was 26 years old and had never held an FDA registration. He had an 8-week certificate from a website. He was currently sitting in a regulated medical device facility telling me my 26 years of compliance work was legacy thinking. I didn't say any of that. I'd learned a long time ago that once you start defending your track record to people who haven't earned theirs, you've already lost the conversation. Mason told me they were releasing me to pursue other opportunities, effective immediately. 3 weeks severance, 3 weeks for 26 years. I did the calculation automatically. 26 years. I had canceled a bass fishing tournament in Kentucky because our autoclave validation was due, and nobody else knew the qualification protocol. I had driven back from my daughter's college graduation because we had an unannounced FDA inspection and the weekend shift called me in a panic. I had filed deviation reports at 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve because the regulatory timeline was non-negotiable. None of that factored into the severance calculation. "It never does." "Understood," I said. Mason blinked. He'd been expecting pushback. I could see it in his posture. He'd probably rehearsed responses to arguments I was never going to make. He wanted the confrontation, raise your voice, threaten legal action, storm out angry. That gives them a story to tell later. It makes their decision look justified. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. "I'll clear out my office," I said. "Who's the interim QA director?" "Brady is transitioning into the role," Mason said, and actually straightened up when he said it, like he was announcing a promotion he was proud of. I looked at Brady. He had put his phone down and was watching me with the careful expression of someone who wasn't sure if I was about to explode. "Does Brady have FDA training documentation? Has he completed GMP coursework? Is his name on our organizational chart filing with FDA?" "We're fast-tracking the paperwork," Mason said. "It's an internal transition. There's no fast track for FDA qualification." I said, "It's a federal regulatory process. The quality director has to be specifically named in our registration." Mason waved his hand. "Bureaucracy," he said. "Brady has system access. That's what matters operationally." I sat there for 3 more seconds, long enough to make sure I understood what I was not going to say next. I understood perfectly. "All right," I said. I stood up and walked out. Back in my office, I started putting things in a cardboard box. It didn't take long. I'm not sentimental about workspace. A coffee mug from our 2022 Christmas party, a framed photo from a bass tournament last spring, a stress ball that had lost most of its shape over the years, a small American flag from our last FDA inspection, when the lead investigator commented on our compliance record. I worked systematically from left to right across my desk, and then I stopped. The QMS master files were sitting in their usual spot on my credenza. 3 black binders with hand-printed labels I'd made myself back in 1998. They contained everything. The device master records for all 14 product lines, the current quality manual with all active signatures, updated 3 months ago, the FDA inspection prep checklist I'd refined over 8 successful audits, every batch record from the past 2 years, organized by product code and lot number, every supplier qualification, every calibration certificate, every deviation report with closed-loop corrective actions, the contact information for our FDA compliance officer, the recall notification protocol I'd never had to use but kept current anyway, the emergency response procedures for manufacturing deviations, 26 years of documentation, organized, current, and inspection ready. I want to be honest about what went through my mind when I looked at those binders. Part of me considered leaving them right there, just walking out and letting whatever happened happen, but I knew what would happen. Brady would eventually find them, not understand the organization system, start pulling documents out of sequence to scan them into his digital system, and by Tuesday morning they'd be a disaster even before the investigators walked through the door. Another part of me thought about calling Mason's assistant and explaining, there's an FDA inspection Tuesday at 8 a.m., and here's what you'll need. 30 seconds, done. I could have prevented the whole thing. I thought about that option for a while. I knew what would follow. Mason would spend the weekend in a panic, throw together something incomplete using Brady's digital system, probably still fail the inspection because the documentation wouldn't meet FDA requirements, and then tell the FDA investigator that the previous QA director had left the program in disarray. I'd seen that move before. The blame always travels downhill, and they always aim it at the person who just left. I thought about my severance agreement. Section 6, Paragraph C. Employee agrees to return all company property upon termination. The binders weren't on our asset inventory list. I had checked, not that afternoon, but I knew they'd never been cataloged as equipment. They were working documents, not capital assets. They were mine to return if requested. Nobody requested. I put them in the box. I picked up the box. I left my badge on the reception desk and walked out into a Friday afternoon that felt warm and slightly surreal. I put the box in my truck. I drove home. I didn't call anyone. The binders sat on my kitchen counter for 4 days. Saturday passed quietly. I reorganized my tackle box, something I hadn't done in 3 years. Every lure in its compartment, every hook sorted by size and type. It took about 2 hours, and I didn't think about work once. That told me more about my mental state than I would have admitted out loud. Sunday, I drove out to Percy Priest Lake in the morning and caught 2 decent bass. Came back, made lunch, watched most of a Titans game that didn't matter much in the standings. The binders sat on my kitchen counter, untouched. Colton texted around 6 p.m. Sunday evening. I read it and set my phone face down on the counter. Brady installed that new software update, deleted another batch of temperature logs to optimize database performance. Mason walked past his computer and said the system looked much cleaner now. I didn't reply. Replying would have been interference. I was a civilian now. Civilians don't fix quality systems for companies that just terminated them. Monday night, another message from Colton. Brady printed out batch records on regular copy paper for tomorrow's audit. No watermarks, no sequential numbering, no controlled document headers. FDA wants original controlled documents with proper signatures. Preston, this is going to be really bad. I read it twice, poured 2 fingers of bourbon, sat with it for a while. Let me explain something about controlled documents for people who haven't worked in FDA-regulated manufacturing. Those aren't just pieces of paper. They're legal records that prove every medical device was manufactured according to approved specifications. Each controlled document has to have specific formatting, sequential numbering, authorized signatures, and revision tracking. If an FDA investigator asks for batch records and you hand them photocopies on regular paper without proper document control, that's not just a compliance issue. That's a federal regulatory violation that can shut down your facility. I thought about calling someone, not Mason. I'd blocked his number Saturday morning after he texted asking for the password to our calibration database. The one Brady has isn't working, he said. The nerve of that text was almost impressive. Fire me on Friday and need tech support by Saturday. I could have called our FDA compliance officer, Rachel Turner, left a message about potential violations. Technically, I still had her direct number. Technically. I was a citizen with knowledge of regulatory non-compliance that could affect patient safety. I thought about what would happen if I did. FDA would call the facility. Mason would answer. Mason would say the previous QA director was disgruntled and making false accusations. There'd be paperwork, investigations, counter-allegations. By the time it resolved, the inspection would be over, and I'd be the one who looked like I had an axe to grind. I put my phone on the charger and went to bed. Tuesday morning, I woke up at 5:30 without an alarm. 26 years of early mornings doesn't let go overnight. I made coffee. Real coffee, the kind that takes 10 minutes to brew properly. I sat on my back deck and watched the sky change from dark gray to pale orange. A red-tailed hawk was working the field behind my neighbor's fence, circling patient and methodical. At 8 a.m. sharp, the FDA investigators arrived at Nashville Medical Components. I know this because Colton was already texting from a supply closet. 2 investigators, 1 observer. Lead investigator is Rachel Turner. She has her laptop open before she's through the front door. She has that look you warned me about. I knew the look. I'd worked with Rachel Turner 4 times over the years during routine inspections. She was thorough in the specific way that makes people on the other side of the clipboard uncomfortable. She didn't accept explanations that weren't documented. She didn't give partial credit for good intentions. She moved through inspection checklists like she was following a precision manufacturing process. I adjusted my thermostat down 1 degree and poured a second cup of coffee. Lindsay tried to show them the new digital sign-in system. It crashed when they tried to enter their information. Turner asked for the paper visitor log. Lindsay said we went fully digital. Turner wrote something down in her notebook. Turner asked for the QA director. Lindsay went to get Brady. I leaned back in my chair. Here's where I have to be honest with you. Part of me felt something in that moment. Not satisfaction exactly. More like the specific feeling you get when you've been watching a pressure gauge climb for months and you finally hear the relief valve activate. You didn't cause the overpressure, you just knew it was coming. Brady came out from the production floor, no hairnet, carrying an energy drink, wearing that startup jacket. He introduced himself as Director of Quality and Process Improvement. I closed my eyes for a second. I could picture it perfectly. Brady walking into that lobby in his casual clothes with his 8-week certificate and his complete lack of awareness about what was standing in front of him. Turner with her laptop open, pen ready, looking at him the way she looked at every checklist item that wasn't going to pass. Turner asked for his FDA qualification documentation. Brady said he was working on getting his training completed. Turner asked to see our current quality manual. Brady went to his computer to pull it up from the digital system. There it was. Turner asked for our quality manual with current signatures. The quality manual is the foundation document for any FDA-regulated manufacturer. It's not optional. It's not something you're working on. If you're the QA director and someone asks for the quality manual and you can't produce it with valid signatures, you're not the QA director. You're someone sitting in the QA director's chair. Brady's trying to print the quality manual from his laptop. The digital signatures aren't displaying properly. Turner asked for the original with wet signatures. Brady doesn't know where it is. Turner closed her laptop. Not slam it, just closed it quiet, which was somehow worse. Colton followed that with 4 words. It's completely over, Preston. He wasn't wrong. I knew exactly what happened next because I'd watched Turner work before. She would take extensive notes. She would ask to speak with senior management, and she would do all of it in the same calm, professional tone she used for everything, because she didn't need to raise her voice. The regulations did that for her. Mason just arrived. He used the word ecosystem 4 times trying to explain Brady's qualifications. Turner asked him to produce our device master records. Mason looked at Brady. Brady looked at his laptop screen. Nobody said anything for about 30 seconds. I stood up, stretched, and went inside to make breakfast. By 11 a.m., Colton's texts had slowed down. That's how I knew the documentation phase was over. When things are still moving, Colton sends rapid updates every few minutes. When it goes quiet, it means the investigators have taken control of the situation and nobody inside is doing anything except sitting and waiting for the outcome. The final summary came at 11:52 a.m. Turner issued Form 483 with 9 observations. No qualified QA director on record, no controlled batch documentation, no calibration program records, insufficient audit trails, deleted temperature data, no proper design controls, inadequate management review records, improper electronic signature implementation, and failure to maintain device master records. Mason tried to explain that they were transitioning to a digital system. Turner handed him the 483 acknowledgement form. He signed it. 2.8 million CMS contracts suspended pending comprehensive corrective actions. FDA is recommending a voluntary recall review for devices manufactured in the past 6 months. Brady is in the parking lot asking if this affects his LinkedIn profile. I read that last line twice, then I finished my scrambled eggs. The call from Sarah Bennett came at 2:47 p.m. She was VP of Regulatory Affairs at the parent company, the Chicago group that had owned Nashville Medical before the acquisition, professional voice, direct sentences. She said she'd been briefed on the inspection outcome. She said the situation required immediate resolution. She said they needed someone with extensive FDA experience to rebuild the quality program and manage the remediation process. I told her I was exploring other opportunities. She offered reinstatement at my previous position plus 18%. I told her returning to the same facility wasn't something I was interested in. There was a pause. Sarah was experienced enough to know I wasn't bluffing and smart enough not to try calling it. I mentioned that I'd heard the VP of Regulatory Affairs position had been open for about 7 months, multiple facilities. someone to ensure QA programs were actually maintained and not just checked off on spreadsheets. Sarah said that position wasn't officially posted yet. I said I understood. She called back 41 minutes later. The position was posted as of that afternoon. VP of Regulatory Affairs, 4 facilities across Tennessee and Alabama. Salary range significantly above my previous position. Could I come in Thursday to discuss terms? I said I'd be there. Mason was terminated for cause 6 weeks later. Gross negligence in personnel decisions, violation of FDA manufacturing regulations, failure to maintain facility compliance requirements. Brady left the building the same day Mason was fired. Last I heard, Mason is consulting for a company that makes app-controlled home security systems. Brady is selling enterprise software again. My new office in Nashville has windows that look out over the Cumberland River. There's a coffee shop downstairs, but I still make my own at home because I have time to do it right now. Competence doesn't argue. It doesn't waste energy trying to convince people who've already decided they know better. It just shows up when the investigators do. And when it doesn't show up, when you've pushed it out the door with 3 weeks severance and a dismissive wave, what's left is someone in chinos and a polo shirt who doesn't know what a DHR is, standing in a lobby with a broken sign-in system, waiting for a federal investigator to close her laptop. Mine always passed. Every inspection, 26 years. That part nobody could take with them when they showed me the door. The people who replace experience with enthusiasm always learn the difference. Usually in front of someone with a clipboard and federal authority. You can disrupt a workflow, restructure a team, and rebrand a job function. You cannot disrupt consequences.